Coming up on Need to Know, organ donations in New York can't keep up with the high demand for transplants. We'll discuss what this means, why more people aren't joining donor registries, and possible changes that could minimize this gap. Also on the show, they're the type of conversations most people take for granted, talking about life, love, hardships, and dreams with your siblings. But how does this happen effectively between deaf and hearing siblings? We'll find out. And he's pretty much a celebrity at one local elementary school. Find out why students can't get enough of our new American Graduate Champion. It's all coming up right now on Need to Know. It's a somewhat surprising stat. Approximately 95% of Americans support organ donation. However, less than half of adults in this country are registered donors. And in New York, only 22% of adults are on the registry. But here's the thing. When it comes to the need for transplants, our state is among the highest in the country. Some doctors say this isn't a medical problem, they call it a social problem. But there are legitimate questions and reservations some have when it comes to joining that registry. To examine this issue, I'm joined by Rob Kochik, Executive Director of Finger Lakes Donor Recovery Network, Jeremy Shaw, a liver transplant recipient from Spencerport, Scott Siemens, brother of organ donor Heather Siemens, and Todd Butler, Executive Director of the Ad Council of Rochester. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
So just to begin, I want to start with the obvious question, and I'll direct this to you, Rob. Why aren't more people donating their organs? And why do you believe, or what do you believe contributes to this disparity between people who support organ donations and then those who register?
Well, just as at the beginning of your show, you talked about conversations, and I think that's really what we're here to encourage all of your viewers to have a conversation. I heard a great quote last week that said, be brave enough to have a conversation that matters. We know that none of us like to talk about it, but if we don't talk about what our wishes are in regard to organ donation, families are faced with making that decision on their loved one's behalf. We know that parents often give consent for their children because it seems like parents are used to making decisions for their children. Adults generally are uncomfortable making decisions for their parents, and even as a spouse, you know, we're often not comfortable making decisions for our spouse either. So that's why it's so important to have the conversation.
And I just want to clarify for viewers, there are two types of organ donors, deceased and living. And for the sake of this interview, we're going to primarily focus on deceased donors. Correct. And studies have shown that the less people trust the medical field, the less likely they're willing to donate. And there are fears about a loved one not receiving quality care at the end of their life, whatever their health battle may be, because if the doctor knows that they're an organ donor. And Scott, your sister Heather, she died earlier this year at the age of 36. And she was able to save someone's life because she was an organ donor. Were there ever any concerns on Heather's end or with your family about the decision for her to be a donor in terms of relation to medical treatment?
No. I mean, the time that was spent at Strong Memorial, you know, with Heather's treatment, there was an amazing amount of care given to Heather that the nurses and the doctors that were working on Heather, they were angels. I mean, there wasn't a minute that went by that she wasn't attended to, and not only that, they were taking care of us too. So there was really never a question as did they do everything they could for Heather. That never came up in anybody's mind.
Well, someone received a successful liver transplant because of your sister. How did Heather, the family, come to decide that donating her organs was an important thing to do?
Heather was always someone that would be willing to help anybody in need. And we had never really talked about organ donation with Heather, but knowing Heather and her personality and her beliefs, we know that she would have wanted it. So that was never really an issue as to whether or not we thought she would want to be an organ donor.
Well, I've read that everything from religion, there are some who believe in keeping the body whole for the afterlife, to medical dramas on television, to issues of talking about death, as you mentioned, can influence someone's decision to not be an organ donor. And the Ad Council of Rochester teamed up with the Finger Lakes Donor Recovery Network to really raise more awareness, to educate and to correct misinformation about being an organ donor. And I understand, Todd, that a large part of your work was reframing how people view organ donation. So talk to me a little bit about why that was pivotal and what you did exactly to try to accomplish that task.
So I want to make a quick comment on the concern about medical care piece, and I think really what's behind that concern is a fear of one's own mortality. I really think that's what's behind it, because I think any one of us, if we give thought to when somebody goes into the medical field, why do they go into it? What is drilled into them in year after year after year of schooling? It's save lives. So the idea that a medical professional would go into a care situation and say, well, I either want to save this life or get their organs for transplant is, I think when we frame it that way, it seems almost silly that a medical professional would take that perspective. I have had a lot of conversations with medical professionals on this, and I think there's that really what's in back of that is that fear of mortality. And that fear of mortality is also what led to one of these issues around reframing the issue. We started off, and for years, the conversation has been become an organ donor, become an organ donor, become an organ donor. And really, nobody wants to become an organ donor, right? Because we know what's happened in most cases to become an organ donor. You've had to pass away. If we're going to have people think about this as becoming an organ donor, I think we're going to have a long road to hoe. As opposed to if we talk about joining the registry, that's something everybody wants to do. We want to join a registry, we want to sign up, we want to make these wishes known for the future when our own mortality does come upon us. That decision we're making today is going to have a positive impact later on. So we've really reframed the way we talk about it from become an organ donor to join the registry.
I'm going to throw out this number. In New York in 2013, more than 500 kids and adults died because of this shortage of organ donations. Jeremy, beginning in the spring of 2009, you were hospitalized multiple times, and you were eventually placed on a liver transplant list. Share a little bit about your story and what you were diagnosed with and how imperative this transplant was for you.
I was diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver, and it progressed very rapidly. And fortunately for me, I did not wait as long as most people, because it's the next person on the list that's the most sick receives the next organ available. And because I was so quickly progressing, I received mine within 6 months of being diagnosed, but that's uncommon, very uncommon. And just it's the lack of organs that now it's just gotten so much worse in 6 years. Because I volunteer at the hospital, I see people waiting, and I understand what they're going through. And if people could just understand what they could be, they're saving somebody's life. There's no hyperbole in that. They are saving multiple lives, possibly, if they can just get their name on the registry. That's the message I'd like to get to people. It's the most important thing to me.
Well, let's piggyback off of that. So what will it take to get more people on the registry and to sign up for the registry? And I'll toss this to you. I've talked with you before about this, Rob. Sure. I mean, people have thrown out the idea of funding incentives similar to people who donate blood. Right now, organ donors are not financially compensated. Is that something? Is that a possible solution with legs, or what else is out there that could improve?
Well, I think the most important thing is to piggyback on what Todd said, is reframing the message. So we've gone from become an organ donor today, which we meant was signing on the registry, to live life to the fullest, help others do the same, and pass life on, which is really what the essence of the campaign is. In New York State, we've had the registry managed through the Department of Health, and majority of New Yorkers enroll to the registry through the DMV when we go to the DMV about every 8 years. It's a little difficult right now to enroll online, and thanks to the governor, through work that we've been doing with the governor's office and the Department of Health, there's money in the budget this year for marketing to do more awareness campaigns and recruitment campaigns, and to also change the administration of the registry to a public-private partnership with the organ procurement organizations and tissue banks throughout the state to make it easier. So we envision it with iPads and smartphones in the future.
Well, Todd Butler, Scott Siemens, Jeremy Shaw, and Rob Kochik, a huge thank you to all of you for joining me for this discussion. And if you're interested in learning more about organ donations or even becoming an organ donor, check out the Finger Lakes Donor Recovery Network for more information, donorrecovery.org. Sibling relationships are dynamic and influence us throughout our lifetime. Some siblings are friends, others tolerate each other, and then there are those with strained relationships. But deaf and hearing siblings have a unique relationship with its own set of challenges that's not often observed or researched. I recently sat down with Judy Jonas and Marla Berkowitz when they were in Rochester. They wrote the book Deaf and Hearing Siblings in Conversation. They say their text is the first to consider both deaf and hearing perspectives on the dynamics of adult sibling relationships. Here's part one of my interview, and joining us is ASL interpreter Linda Seipool. Just to begin, Marla and Judy, what is it about the relationships between deaf and hearing siblings that you believe was vital to explore and research and share with readers?
Well, the sibling relationship that people have is the longest in their lives, a great deal longer than their parents. Our parents died before us most of the time, and therefore you've got these people who know you since you're born. If the oldest, you know the siblings since they're born, and why not have a relationship with them? I mean, why would you want to dismiss people who know you better than anybody else in the whole wide world? And so siblings in general is a topic of research, and deaf and hearing siblings has had almost no research, and we fill the gap in that topic. And more importantly, I think, because there is some little bit of information on deaf and hearing siblings, we are the only topic or book out there that has included the deaf and the hearing perspective on the sibling relationship.
And also, the sibling perception really creates a balanced perspective. Historically, the research and the studies that are out there are deaf people and deaf children, and the focus has been on the disability that influenced the hearing siblings. So we feel that the deaf perspective, we are offering that in the book. It's a more balanced perspective. Our siblings, we have it called we are kind of the insider researchers for this topic.
How surprising is that, the fact that there is such a lack of research? I know that you've called your work a pioneering work on this subject. I mean, that's got to be surprising for some people to hear.
Yes, because it's easy to make assumptions on the topic about the sibling relationship. I personally want to read a book about siblings, especially about deaf and hearing siblings, and I couldn't find anything in the library myself. So I was wondering about my own family, my own relationship, my own siblings. And there was the challenge of communication and identity and other topics that are related to that. So I wanted the opportunity to get tools and strategies for improving my relationship with my siblings, and I couldn't find anything. And then I ran into Judy, and we shared our stories and our experiences, and then we found other people as well, and we decided we had to do it, and we had to pursue the topic, and made it happen. And that's why we're calling it pioneering work.
And I think it made me crazy to think that nobody had done this before. That really was, I think that was shocking to both of us. Like, this is not a rocket science to think that you need two perspectives on an issue.
Right.
And yet, nobody had done it. So I think that was the spark that fired us on.
One of the goals of your research in this text is to understand and break through the impact of stigma over the lives of deaf and hearing siblings, and really to open this pathway for sibling conversations. That's the big understanding behind this. First, break down this stigma. What does it involve?
The stigma really is the negative label. That negative label means what it looks like when you face something, and something that we call attribution. By that I mean society in general has a perception of people with a disability. So it happens within the family, you have this label, this stigma of growing up, and you carry it with you into your adulthood. By that I mean, from our research, we found that for the deaf child in the family, they come with a feeling of pity, or they'll have a feeling of embarrassment, and there's a feeling of that I have to take care of my deaf sibling. The deaf sibling can't take care of themselves, for example. In some families, the parents will ask the hearing sibling to take them across the street. They can't go across the street by themselves because they can't hear. What if there's a car coming? Other examples might be, you might join a group of friends and they don't want to leave the deaf sibling out, so they have to take their deaf sibling with them. They have their own friends, they may have their own group, but there's that negative stigma that goes with the child as the child grows up. So our goal with this book was to help recognize, until you let go of that attribution and look at your sibling as an equal, then that really means that you can have a human relationship with the deaf sibling and with each other.
Very good. Well, I want to know, Marla, you interviewed 10 deaf adults. Judy, you interviewed 12 of their hearing siblings. And I love you have this Hasidic proverb early in the book, and I love the stories that you involved in. You said, tell someone, the proverb is, tell someone a fact and you reach their minds, give them a story and you touch their souls. And I loved reading the varied stories that were involved with this from your encounters with them. And what was interesting to me, the siblings, barely any of them had ever had such discussions about their deaf or hearing sibling. This was something that was brand new to them. And some of these conversations lasted for hours. And I want to know why, based on, you were there, you had these interviews, what was so important, do you believe, about having these types of discussions?
It's hard to imagine that you can grow up with a sibling who is different from yourself and never talk about it. And it blew my mind that was true of all of the siblings I met except one.
Okay.
And myself.
Okay.
So there were 2 of us who had talked, but the other 11 had never had a conversation about having a deaf sibling or having a hearing sibling. And we thought, well, is it the elephant in the room, that you never talk about when, for example, you have alcoholic parents and you just can't talk about it because it's so scary to talk about? And we don't know the answer to that question of why they never talked about it. I know why my sibling and I talked about it. My deaf sibling and I are very close. And for example, if I was interpreting at a family event, which as a sibling I did a lot before I decided that before we all decided the family should hire interpreters. But when before that all happened, after that all happened, my brother and I sat down one day and I said, look, I know we have a family thing coming up and I'm going to probably interpret a lot, but you have to understand that if I say I'm not interpreting for a while, I'm not interpreting for a while. And he would, we would just talk about it, and it's like, okay, if I see you going off on your own, that's just fine. But why the other 11 people never talked about it, I wish I knew. Maybe it was just too scary.
Yes. And to add to that, I think it's more, if you think about the sibling are taking each other for granted. They live together, they grow up together, they interact together, they see each other all the time. They may even share the same interests. They may even have the same types of goals. But we're talking about the siblings in general. In my perspective, really, it's very personal. It's also, you're talking about yourself. We're talking about people in general tend to be very, careful or cautious, and they don't want to really expose themselves. You really have to expose yourself in these types of conversations. So, but we also, we need to talk about your own communication challenges with the deaf sibling. Really, it's a very sensitive topic. It's a very sensitive topic because if you can't communicate, how can you have a real relationship? It's really hard enough. If you can't communicate, you need to know what to expect. From our research shows that there's this common sharing of language and meaning, and we can then move to the next level of this intimate relationship.
I think I want to add something to that. I think what most people don't realize, I know when I meet people out on the street who hear I have a deaf brother, they assume that every family signs. Well, guess what? Most of them don't. Oh, the majority of families that have deaf children never sign. And so imagine trying to have a conversation. You go to Russia and you don't know Russian, and you want to have a conversation with somebody. Well, that's the kind of struggles that the siblings who don't sign with one another can be having, and they can have the superficial, hi, how are you, how you're feeling, how was your day. They may not be able to get much past that.
That was part one of our two-part interview with Marla Berkowitz and Judy Jonas, authors of the book Deaf and Hearing Siblings in Conversation. We were joined by translator Linda Seipool. You can learn more about the book on their website, siblingconversations.org. And this segment was part of WXXI's move to include, a partnership of WXXI and the Golisano Foundation, working with the community to lead change toward the inclusion of people with intellectual and physical disabilities. Give us your thoughts on what you just heard. Visit movetoinclude.org. It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men and women. That's a slightly revised Frederick Douglass quote that Rochester resident Walter Cooper lives by. The scientist, activist, humanitarian, and Regent Emeritus of New York is supposed to be living a life of retirement. But he tells me, this time in the words of Martin Luther, outwardly you are a dutiful servant of all. So to Walter Cooper, that means one's work is never done, especially when it comes to ensuring that children become leaders and learners for life.
Good morning.
What do we say? G-O-O-G-M-O-I-N-I-N-G. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Walter Cooper.
Good morning, Miss Scatia. Good morning, students.
Good morning, Dr. Walter Cooper.
Walter Cooper, or Dr. Walter, as some students refer to him,
You mean your reading challenge?
is a man of many hats at School 10 in the Rochester City School District.
How old are you?
I'm 86. I'm 86.
Long, healthy life. My grandma.
He's the go-to for learning about eyewitness accounts of history.
Our teacher, Ms. Barrett, told you that you were in the, the march, not the summer.
The March on Washington, yes, I went there, yeah. It was more like a spiritual march. You had the world's population represented.
He's also a motivator.
What do you want to do career-wise? What do you want to be?
I'm a pediatrician.
Pediatrician?
Hairstylist or a dance teacher.
Hairstylist.
Or a dance teacher.
Okay, be a good one, because there's lots of competition there.
A challenger.
Why are you interested in being a gamer? Pardon me, speak up loud. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm your friend.
Because I'm good at it.
I'm your friend. Shake my hand. What is it?
Because I'm good at it.
You're good at it, okay. You'll be better at it if you could read well. Right.
And a grandfather. He also happens to be the namesake of the school. In 2010, the building was named Dr. Walter Cooper Academy. The former research scientist at Kodak and longtime education advocate in Rochester says it's an honor that hits close to home.
My family actually came out of the Depression, and we moved to evolve to another higher plane economically and knowledge-wise, all because of education. This is where your dollars come from, right here. We had no money, but we had the drive and the interest to make something out of our lives.
Engaging with the students of the Dr. Walter Cooper Academy is a highlight of his busy weekly schedule.
Okay, have a good school day.
Cooper usually visits the school twice a week, stopping by classrooms.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Cooper.
The nurse's office.
I hope you'll feel better.
The cafeteria.
I want everybody to be successful. That's why I'm here.
And school leadership meetings.
So what are the problems in the school?
He's involved in everything. He comes to all of our planning meetings. He's been an advocate for us when we needed things at central office. And so he's family to us, you know, and he's just not a building namesake.
Cooper's priorities are to ensure students know their worth, that they show up to school every day, and that they're all reading at grade level by the 3rd grade. The last of which requires what he calls tough medicine at times.
How can you be proud of that? Because that determines your future. You can't be proud of not being able to read. People call you a dummy and everything, and you end up being dependent upon somebody else for your future.
His focus on literacy is part personal, as his own father never learned how to read or write.
My father didn't have a day of education.
It's also a school-wide mission known as the Cooper Challenge.
Are you meeting your reading challenges? The youngster has to read a book and the parent has to sign off on it. And that becomes part of the reading challenge. It's X number of books per week or per month. And so it's what I would call a very relevant and convenient scheme to engage the parent in, at least in terms of overlooking their youngsters' reading.
I wasn't actually reading until he had talked to me, and then it made me feel like I should actually read. And I actually think it's fun to read. Right now I'm reading these scientific books that he has read, some of them back in his days, but I'm learning.
You know, I will convey to them that you'll become a modern slave if you don't learn to read, write, and comprehend, because you'll never have a job of value in a society that actually demands some kind of educational and therefore economic stability.
And according to Walter Cooper, the work of educating children isn't successful unless it also includes the family. So this summer, the school is launching its first 6-week summer learning program for parents. The agenda includes lessons on developmental needs of kids, literacy, new techniques to promote curiosity and learning, and more.
I believe that the family is indeed the primary determinant of educational achievement. But if a youngster does not have family, how do you make amends or how do you actually provide for that youngster new insights and new hope? The school has to be the youngster's refuge.
Cooper says not much can slow him down in his work with the team at the school to continue making the Dr. Walter Cooper Academy a refuge for kids, and to continue instilling in students the Cooper Code to never, never, never give up.
This segment was part of our ongoing Need to Know series called American Graduate Champions. Throughout the year, we'll highlight individuals and organizations making an impact on a student, a classroom, the community, as we join forces to help area kids succeed on the journey from preschool to graduation. To learn more and to nominate your own local American Graduate Champion, go to wxxi.org/grad. That's it for this edition of Need to Know. I'm Helene B. and Duty Hofer. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you next week right here on WXXI TV.